Hey Fairlawn, we're back with another question and answer video. I just wanted to remind you that this is going to be on the sermon from last Sunday where we were in Mark 15, 1 through 5, looking at Jesus' court scene with Pilate and the religious leaders. And again, go ahead and check out the sermon if you haven't yet at the link that is on the Facebook post here. Now, I was told last time that my video was too long by the boss man, i.e. Corey, and so I'm going to try and keep it a little shorter this time. I'm just going to do one question here. So the question is this: isn't all obedience sacrificial? Why should we strive for greater degrees of sacrificial obedience? So this is obviously kind of two questions here, kind of mashed into one. And so I want to deal with the first one here. Isn't all obedience sacrificial? Now, there is a sense in which all obedience is sacrificial. If you think about it, if you are obeying somebody else's command to do something, you are in a sense sacrificing something. You're sacrificing potentially what you want to do. You're potentially sacrificing your own will and submitting it to them. There are definitely ways in which obedience is always sacrificial. But what we were pointing out in the message on Sunday is that Jesus is calling us to a higher standard of sacrificial obedience, an obedience that really sacrifices something, that forces us to sacrifice something for Him. And I think that because of the world that we live in with the freedoms that we enjoy, it's not necessary for us to sacrifice when we walk in obedience to Christ. We can go to church, we can do a lot of the spiritual disciplines and things like that, and live in obedience to God in that way. And that way, because of where we live, doesn't require us to sacrifice anything. There's people in other parts of the world that if they get caught praying, they're going to get put in jail. Or if they get caught going to a worship service, they're going to get put in jail. And so for them, that type of obedience that is just really easy for us is super sacrificial for them. But because of America, the freedoms that we enjoy here, that type of obedience, you can obey God here, but not necessarily have to sacrifice for Him. And so Jesus, I think, when we look at ourselves here in America, Jesus is calling us to a greater level of sacrificial obedience. And really all of His followers. Consider some of Jesus' calls to follow Him. Matthew 16:24 says, "Then Jesus told His disciples, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me.'" We talked a little bit about that in the sermon on Sunday, how God is calling us, Christ is calling us to a self-crucifying life, a life that is continually denying ourselves and seeking what Christ would want for our lives. Consider Luke 14:26. "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." So here Jesus is setting up things that could potentially take priority over Him. Our own family, our own lives. He says, if your love for me is not such that it looks like you hate your own family, like if your family is against me, then you need to hate your family in order to follow me. Your love for me must be greater than your love for anything else, including our own family or our own lives even. So you can see Jesus talking about this discipleship, this following Him that requires sacrificial obedience. It requires sacrificing something in order to follow Him. And then Matthew 8:21, another one of His disciples said to Him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father before following Jesus." And Jesus said to him, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead." Now that's like a radical statement by Jesus, but again, what He's saying is, if you're going to follow me, there can be no competing allegiances. There can be no competing gods that you are serving. There can be no competing there can be nothing competing against your affection and love for me. This is the type of discipleship that I'm calling you to. And it's a discipleship that will require you to sacrifice something. So I wanted to then just kind of look here for a second at why we should strive for greater degrees of sacrificial obedience. I've just got 3 quick reasons to lay out here for you. So why should we strive for this obedience that is sacrificial to Jesus? I think the first reason is because we enjoy freedom in our country that allows us to willingly pursue that. We're not forced like other people are in the world to. Even the smallest obedience to Christ can be very sacrificial, to the point of people sacrificing their lives to go to a church service. We don't face that here, but we have freedom here that should empower us to willingly pursue sacrificial obedience to Christ. And I think that it's because of those freedoms that we enjoy here that we should be pursuing that sacrificial obedience to Him. And I think that the second thing here plays right into that, that as we sacrificially obey Christ in these radical ways, it will provide an awesome opportunity to share the gospel with others. When other people see us sacrificing for Christ, it's going to create in them a desire to understand and know why we are doing that. And that will create an awesome platform for us to share the gospel with them. And then thirdly, and most importantly, pursuing this kind of sacrificial obedience is glorifying to God. When we strive to live as Jesus lived, in His power and the power of the Holy Spirit dwelling within us, it honors and glorifies God for us to pursue this kind of obedience to Christ and a genuine following Him, and taking up the call to follow Him as radically as He lays it out in His Gospels. Now, I just want to remind you as we close here, we cannot pursue this radical sacrificial obedience to Christ without His power and without His help. And so don't leave this little short Q&A thinking that you can do this in your own strength and your own power. Look to Jesus, rest in His perfect obedience and His sacrificial obedience for you, and allow that to fuel your desires and heart as you pursue walking in that for Him. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.